There is a terrified animal living inside your nervous system right now. It wakes up when your alarm goes off and begs you to hit snooze. It freezes when you need to have a difficult conversation, and it runs for comfort the second you feel pain. Most people spend their entire lives feeding this animal, negotiating with it, trying to calm it down with distraction and cheap dopamine. But 400 years ago, a Japanese swordsman named Miyamoto Musashi discovered a way to silence it permanently. He didn't use positive affirmations, and he certainly didn't rely on motivation. He used a method so ruthless that history remembers him not just as a warrior, but as a frightening force of nature. What you are about to hear is not a philosophy lesson. It is a tactical manual for rewiring your brain to stop feeling hesitation. We often look at people who possess this level of discipline, the elite athletes, the special operators, the CEOs who seem to function on 4 hours of sleep, and we tell ourselves a comforting lie. We say they were born that way. We say they have a genetic gift that allows them to bypass the fear and fatigue that crush the rest of us. It feels safer to believe that, because if they were born that way, then we have an excuse to stay exactly where we are. But here is the part most people miss, and it is the reason why Musashi's story is so uncomfortable. He wasn't the strongest samurai of his time. He wasn't the fastest. He didn't have a wealthy patron or a fancy school. In fact, for much of his life, he looked like a vagrant. Yet, between the ages of 13 and 29, he fought over 60 life-or-death duels and never lost once. He didn't survive because he was lucky. He survived because he systematically eliminated every single human weakness that makes us hesitate. Before he died, he wrote down exactly how he did it in a text called The Book of Five Rings. Today, we are going to apply that text to a modern life. We are going to look at a test.
Case, a story that mirrors the average experience to see how these ancient principles physically alter the brain. Imagine a man named Lucas. He is 32 years old, an engineer, married, 2 kids. If you looked at his life from the outside, he seems stable. But inside, Lucas is crumbling. He is the definition of a man running on autopilot. He has bought 3 gym memberships in the last 5 years and canceled every single one of them. He starts a new diet every Monday and breaks it by Wednesday afternoon. He has big dreams for his career, but when a high-stakes project lands on his desk, he freezes. He procrastinates until the night before, fueled by panic and caffeine, delivering work that is barely adequate. His problem isn't that he doesn't want to change. His problem is that his intention is strong, but his execution is pathetic. He lives in a constant state of negotiation with himself. When the alarm rings at 6, he bargains for 10 more minutes. When his wife brings up a budget issue, he bargains for a later time to talk. He is leaking energy in every direction, reacting to life instead of commanding it. This came to a head on a Tuesday morning in a glass-walled conference room. Lucas was presenting to his department head, a notoriously aggressive man. Lucas had prepared the slides, he knew the numbers, but as soon as the question started, something snapped. His heart rate spiked to 120 beats per minute, his vision blurred at the edges, his hands started shaking so visibly he had to hide them under the table. He couldn't find his words. He excused himself, walked to the bathroom, locked the stall door, and sat on the floor gasping for air. The doctor called it a panic attack, brought on by chronic stress and a lack of mental fitness. But the diagnosis didn't fix the problem. The doctor said something that stuck with him, though. He said, "Your body is responding to a tiger in the room, but there is no tiger. Your nervous system
lost the ability to distinguish between discomfort and death." Lucas went home and fell down the rabbit hole of the internet, looking for a cure. He didn't want medication, he wanted control. That is when he found Musashi. And what he found shocked him because it went against every piece of modern self-help advice he had ever read. Modern advice tells you to build habits by making them easy, by rewarding yourself, by stacking them. Musashi's advice was to destroy the need for conditions altogether. The first principle Lucas encountered was the principle of elimination. Musashi wrote, "Do not harbor having a preference for this or that weapon. To become over-familiar with one weapon is as much a fault as not knowing it sufficiently." At first glance, this sounds like combat advice. Don't rely only on your sword. But look closer. Musashi is talking about dependency. He is saying that if your strength depends on specific conditions, you are not strong. You are just lucky. Lucas realized his entire life was built on dependencies. He could only work deep if he had his noise-canceling headphones. He could only exercise if he had a good night's sleep and his favorite pre-workout drink. He could only be patient with his children if his day at work went smoothly. His discipline was a house of cards that collapsed the moment the wind blew. Musashi trained in the rain. He trained in the mud. He trained when he was starving, when he was sick, and when he was exhausted. He intentionally broke the link between how I feel and what I do. So, Lucas began an experiment. He decided to eliminate the friction by removing the equipment. No gym, no special clothes, just push-ups. He set a number, 20 reps every single day. It sounds laughably easy, but the rule was that he had to do them regardless of the circumstance. The first week was fine. The dopamine of a new goal carried him through. But the data doesn't fail. Our interpretation does. We think the start is the hardest
part, but the start is easy. The middle is where the risk quietly increases. On day 12, Lucas came home late. He had a headache, he had eaten terrible food, and he was exhausted. He crawled into bed, pulled up the covers, and realized he hadn't done his 20 reps. The animal in his brain started bargaining immediately. "Just do 40 tomorrow," it whispered. "Rest is important for recovery. You've had a hard day. You deserve this." This is the moment. This is the exact split second where mediocrity wins. It's not the big failure, it's the logical excuse. Lucas remembered Musashi's mud. He got out of bed, in his pajamas, dropped to the carpet, and did the 20 reps. They were slow, they were ugly, but he did them. And when he stood up, he felt a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in his self-respect. He had broken the negotiation. A week later, he had to travel for a conference. The hotel room was tiny. He did them between the bed and the wall. A week after that, he caught a cold. His joints ached. He did 10 in the morning and 10 at night. He stopped asking himself, "Do I feel like doing this?" Asking that question is a trap. He simply observed that the task needed doing, and he did it. This brings us to the second and much deeper layer of transformation, Hyoshin. In English, this translates roughly to the everyday mind or the normal mind, but the implications are terrifyingly deep. Musashi wrote, "Both in fighting and in everyday life, you should be determined though calm. Meet the situation without tenseness, yet not recklessly. Your spirit settled, yet unbiased." He is describing a biological state where the gap between resting and combat disappears. Most of us live in two states. We are either bored and checked out, or we are panicked and hyperreactive. When a crisis hits, a car cuts us off, a client cancels, a spouse yells, our cortisol spikes, our frontal cortex shuts down, and we react emotionally. We lose our IQ points exactly when we need them most.
Musashi argued that the warrior must maintain the exact same mental frequency while drinking tea as he does while crossing swords. If your mind spikes in battle, you have already lost, because you are reacting to fear rather than seeing reality. Lucas started applying Hyoshin to his anxiety. He knew he couldn't stop the adrenaline, that's a biological reflex, but he could stop the narrative he built around it. The test came 3 weeks later. A project he was leading fell behind schedule due to a vendor error. He had to deliver the bad news to that same aggressive boss. As he walked toward the office, he felt the familiar symptoms. The tightness in the chest, the shallow breathing, the animal screaming, "Run!" In the past, Lucas would have spent the walk rehearsing apologies, frantically thinking of excuses, spinning spirals of catastrophe. This time, he tried something different. He turned his attention inward and just watched the physical sensations. "My heart is beating fast," he noted. No judgment, just data. "My palms are sweating. My stomach feels tight." He didn't try to calm down.
trying to calm down is a form of resistance. He just let the sensations exist without attaching a story to them. He walked into the office. The boss looked up, saw the report, and slammed his hand on the desk. "This is unacceptable," he shouted. The old Lucas would have flinched. The old Lucas would have stammered. But the new Lucas was practicing the everyday mind. He felt the spike of fear, but he didn't ride it. He stayed on the shore and watched the wave crash. He waited 2 seconds. "You're right," Lucas said. His voice was steady. It freaked him out a little. "It is unacceptable. Here is the timeline for the fix, and here is how we prevent it next quarter." The boss blinked. He was used to smelling blood. He was used to excuses. When you give someone nothing to push against, they lose their balance. The meeting ended in 5 minutes. Lucas walked out, and his
Hands weren't shaking. Neuroscience supports what Musashi knew intuitively 400 years ago. When you practice non-reactive observation, what clinical psychologists now call exposure therapy or mindfulness integration, you are physically reshaping the amygdala. You are raising the threshold for what your brain considers a threat. What used to trigger a panic attack now triggers only a mild alert. But mental control is fragile without physical proof. You can meditate all day, but if your body is soft, your mind will eventually collapse under pressure. Musashi wrote, "You must train day and night in order to make your decisions quick and right." Lucas had conquered the consistency of the push-ups, but he hadn't conquered intensity. He was consistent, but he was comfortable. Musashi didn't believe in comfort. He believed in seini no I, the spirit of the warrior that dominates the environment. So Lucas decided to escalate. The Lucas of 3 months ago couldn't stick to a diet for 2 days. The Lucas of today decided to do something bordering on insanity for a corporate dad. He committed to 100 push-ups a day, every day, for 30 days. This is where the advice sounds right, but can still be dangerous. People hear, "push yourself," and they injure themselves on day 1. Lucas didn't try to do them all at once. He just said the number 100 had to be hit before midnight. Day 1 took him an hour. He did sets of 5. He was trembling. Day 5, he couldn't lift his arms above his head to wash his hair in the shower. His wife told him he was being obsessive. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You're not training for the Olympics." He couldn't explain it to her yet. He wasn't training his chest muscles. He was killing the negotiator in his head. Every time he dropped to the floor when he didn't want to, he was casting a vote for a new identity. By day 15, the soreness morphed into a dull, constant thrum. He stopped complaining about it. And something
Strange started happening at work. The noise of the office, the gossip, the petty complaints, the stress about quarterly earnings started to feel distant. When you have voluntarily subjected yourself to physical suffering every morning, a rude email doesn't register as pain. It puts things in perspective. Musashi lived a life of extreme hardship so that the hardship of battle would feel familiar. Lucas was microdosing hardship so that the stress of modern life would feel easy. But there is a trap here, a trap that catches almost everyone who starts a self-improvement journey. It is the trap of the finish line. We tell ourselves, "I just need to get through this 30-day challenge," or "I just need to lose these 10 pounds." We view the effort as a transaction. We pay the price, we get the result, and then we stop. Musashi called this the stopping mind, and he considered it a death sentence. In sword fighting, if you strike your opponent and then relax because you think you've won, that is the exact moment you get killed. The battle isn't over when the enemy falls. The battle is over when you are safe. This introduces the concept of zanshin, literally the remaining mind, or lingering awareness. It is the state of sustained alertness that follows action. Lucas finished his 30-day challenge on a Sunday. He did his 100th push-up, stood up, and waited for the confetti. He waited for the feeling of euphoria. But there was nothing. Just a quiet room and sore triceps. The old pattern would be to celebrate, to order a pizza, to take a week off. "I earned it," he would say. But he had been reading the Book of Void. He understood that the celebration is the vulnerability. Instead of quitting, he applied zanshin. He finished the set, and he didn't collapse. He stood there for 60 seconds, breathing, scanning his body, maintaining the tension. He didn't check his phone. He didn't turn on the TV. He just existed in the aftermath. He realized that if he stopped,
now he would slide back. The entropy of life is always pulling you back to zero. Zanshin is the refusal to slide back. It is the understanding that there is no done. There is only
ready. This shift in perspective is what separates the people who have a good year from the people who have a good life. Lucas didn't stop at day 30. He didn't even tell anyone he had finished the challenge. He just woke up on day 31 and did it again. And this is when people started looking at him differently. They looked at him differently not because he was arrogant, but because his presence had become uncomfortable. When you eliminate your own weaknesses, you inadvertently become a mirror for everyone around you. His coworkers stopped complaining about their Mondays when he was in the room because they knew he wouldn't validate their misery. His friends stopped making jokes about starting their diet tomorrow because his existence proved that tomorrow is just a lie we tell ourselves to feel better about giving up today. This social friction is the first price of the scariest level of strength. You become isolated, not because you push people away, but because you are operating on a frequency they cannot receive. But Lucas was about to face a test that would make social awkwardness feel like a joke. On day 105, the email landed. Emergency all-hands meeting, 10 a.m., mandatory. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. The company had lost a major contract. They were cutting 30% of the staff immediately. The department head, the same aggressive man Lucas had faced down months ago, started reading the list of names. Lucas. The old Lucas would have spiraled instantly. His mind would have jumped to the mortgage, the tuition for his kids, the shame of unemployment. He would have felt the adrenaline dump, the nausea, the desperate need to plead his case. But Lucas had spent 105 days practicing Fudoshin. Fudoshin translates
the immovable mind. Musashi often used the metaphor of a large tree. The branches might move in the wind, but the trunk does not. The roots are too deep. It is different from apathy. Apathy means you don't care. Fudoshin means you care, but you are not shaken. When his name was called, Lucas monitored his internal dashboard. He felt a spike of surprise. He felt the cold pressure of uncertainty, but he didn't react. He didn't cry, he didn't shout, and he didn't freeze. He simply accepted the new reality as if it were a weather report. It is raining, therefore I will get an umbrella. I am fired, therefore I will find a new path. He looked at his boss and nodded once. I understand. What is the timeline for the handover? The room went silent. His colleagues were weeping. Some were yelling. They were wasting enormous amounts of energy fighting a reality that had already happened. Lucas was already moving into the future. He walked back to his desk, packed his box, and left the building. He wasn't suppressing his emotions, he was bypassing the refractory period. Most people spend weeks paralyzed by the shock of a crisis. Lucas skipped the shock and went straight to strategy. This is why Musashi was terrifying. It wasn't that he couldn't feel fear, it was that his recovery time from fear was zero. The next day, while his former colleagues were posting angry rants on social media or drinking to numb the anxiety, Lucas woke up at 5 a.m. He did his 100 push-ups, he sat in silence, and then he applied Musashi's most abstract yet practical principle, Hyoho, the strategy of the void. Musashi wrote, "In the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom has existence, principle has existence, the way has existence, spirit is nothingness." It sounds mystical, but in a tactical sense, it means operating without noise. In a sword fight, if you have a preconceived plan, I will strike him on the left, you are rigid. If he moves right, you die. The void is the state of
having no plan, but being ready for everything. It is absolute adaptability. Lucas applied this to his job hunt. He didn't mass apply to 500 jobs out of desperation. That is fighting with noise. He looked at the market, he looked at his skills. He identified 3 companies where his specific type of steady, non-reactive leadership was missing. He got an interview 2 weeks later. The interviewer asked him, "What is your biggest weakness?" Standard advice says you should spin a positive into a negative, like, "I work too hard." But Lucas was done with lies. He was done with posturing. He leaned back, embodying the void. No tension, no desperation to please. "I used to be reactive," he said. "I used to let stress dictate my decisions. But for the last 6 months, I have trained myself to remain effective regardless of pressure. I don't need to be managed emotionally. I just need a target." He got the job. He negotiated a 40% raise, not because he was aggressive, but because he was willing to walk away. The power in any negotiation belongs to the person who needs it least. And because Lucas had found validation internally, through his own suffering and discipline, he didn't need the job to feel like a man. He just wanted it. That distinction is felt by everyone in the room. 6 months later, Lucas was thriving, but he had one final invisible wall to break through. It is the wall that stops 99% of people who make it this far. He was afraid of losing it. He had become attached to his routine. He was terrified that if he missed one day of push-ups or if he lost his cool just once, the old Lucas would return. He was clinging to his discipline like a life raft. This is where Musashi delivers his final, fatal lesson, Sutemi. Sutemi translates loosely to sacrificing the body or throwing away the self. In Kendo, it is a strike where you commit so fully to the attack that you leave yourself completely unguarded. You accept that you might die in order
to deliver the killing blow. Musashi wrote in his final text, the Dokudo, "Do not regret what you have done," and "Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs for your old age." He is talking about letting go of the ego that is trying to protect itself. Lucas realized that his fear of breaking the streak was just another form of weakness. He was still dependent. He was dependent on his own success. So he did the unthinkable. He stopped counting. He stopped tracking the days. He stopped telling himself he was on a journey. He realized that as long as he viewed this as a challenge, it was something separate from him. It was a costume he was wearing. He transitioned into Ken Zen Ichi. The sword and Zen are one. This is the state where the practice disappears because the practice has become the person. You don't do discipline anymore. You are discipline. You don't try to be honest. You are honesty. Lucas woke up one morning with the flu, a bad one. The old Lucas would have used it as an excuse. The challenge Lucas would have forced himself to do 100 reps and possibly injured himself out of pride. The integrated Lucas simply adjusted. He did 20 slow, mindful reps to keep the pathway open, drank water, and went to work. He didn't beat himself up. He didn't feel guilty. He just did what was optimal. The anxiety was gone. Not suppressed, gone. Because there was no self left to protect. He wasn't trying to be a good engineer or a tough guy. He was just functioning, pure and clean, like water flowing over a rock. This is the scary level. It is scary because it is inhumanly efficient. When you look at someone who has reached this state, you don't see the neurotic ticking that plagues the rest of us. You don't see the hesitation. You see someone who moves through life with the terrifying grace of a predator. Miyamoto Musashi died in a cave at the age of 61. He gave away all his possessions. He didn't care about his legacy. He died kneeling,
upright, leaning on his sword. He had no wife, no children, no home. By modern standards, he was a failure. But he died with a mind that was vast, clear, and absolutely free. He had conquered the only enemy that actually matters, the voice inside that says, "I can't." You do not need to live in a cave to achieve this. You do not need to fight 60 duels. But you do need to declare war on your own comfort. The path is simple, but it is steep. First, eliminate the dependencies. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Second, practice the everyday mind. Watch your emotions without obeying them. Third, survive the lingering awareness. Don't relax just because you won. And finally, throw away the self. Stop protecting your ego and start using your life. Most people who watch this will nod their heads, feel a momentary spark of motivation, and then click on the next video. They will go back to negotiating with their alarm clock tomorrow morning. They will go back to the comfortable misery of being normal. But a few of you, maybe only one of you, will turn off this screen and look at the floor. You will look at the space between your bed and the wall, and you will realize that the battlefield isn't in 17th century Japan. It is right there, on the carpet. And the duel starts now. What is the one dependency you are going to cut today? Not tomorrow, today. Let me know in the comments, and then go do it. Thank you for watching.